far beyond the borders of the known world, where the mountains seemed to scrape the sky and the forests whispered secrets to the wind, there existed a legend. It was a story told in hushed voices by those who ventured too far from civilization, a tale passed down in cryptic fragments, as if the land itself wished to keep its mysteries buried. The legend spoke of the Caves of Wonder, a place where the earth itself shimmered with unseen magic, and the boundaries between the natural and supernatural blurred like the fading light at dusk. Hidden deep within the heart of the mountain range known as the Veiled Peaks, the caves were said to hold treasures beyond imagination, not just in gold and jewels, but in knowledge, power, and secrets lost to time. Few had sought the caves, and fewer still had returned. The air around them was thick with a strange energy, one that drew the curious and the brave, but also the reckless. For the caves were not simply a place to explore. They were a challenge, a riddle that demanded more than just courage. They required understanding, reverence, and a willingness to give up everything you thought you knew about the world. It was in this shadowed world of myth and danger that we find our protagonist, Arya Rivers, a young cartographer with a heart full of ambition and a mind eager for adventure. Arya had grown up on stories of the Caves of Wonder, tales that her grandfather had told her before he passed, stories of ancient civilizations and forgotten treasures, of magic that pulsed in the very stones of the caves. But most of all, she remembered the way he spoke of the gateway, the hidden entrance that could only be found by those worthy to enter. Arya had always been fascinated by his stories, but when he died, the legends seemed to die with him. Until now, one evening, after weeks of research and following cryptic maps from her grandfather's collection, Arya uncovered something that made her heart race. A faded, torn piece of parchment. Her grandfather's last note, scrawled in hurried ink, contained a clue. It was a riddle, and it held the final key to unlocking the hidden path to the caves. Where the sun kisses the mountain's heart, and the river weeps in shadows dark. Follow the silence, step with care. The gateway waits where none dare. For Arya, this was it. This was the chance to discover the truth behind the legends, to find the Caves of Wonder and claim the knowledge her grandfather had spoken of. She packed her gear, strapped on her boots, and with nothing but the map, the riddle, and her courage, she set off toward the Veiled Peaks. The journey was long and treacherous. The path was obscured by thick forests, hidden from the prying eyes of the world, and the air grew thin as she ascended higher into the mountains. But with each step, Arya felt herself draw closer to something greater, closer to the mystery her grandfather had left behind. Days passed, and Arya's journey brought her deeper into the heart of the mountains. The forests began to thin, giving way to jagged rocks and steep cliffs. The sun, once a warm and welcoming companion, became distant, its light flickering between clouds as she reached the highest points of the Veiled Peaks. It was on the fourth day of her trek that she first saw the river, the one her grandfather had spoken of. It was a small stream, meandering quietly through a narrow valley, its waters dark and still, as though the river had forgotten the joy of flowing. The air around it felt heavy, almost mournful, and the forest that surrounded it was eerily silent. The trees stood like sentinels, their branches twisted into unnatural shapes, their leaves barely rustling in the breeze. Arya knelt beside the stream, examining its waters. It was as though the river was indeed weeping, its once clear waters now clouded with dark silt. She recalled the riddle her grandfather had left her, the line about the river weeping in shadows dark, and she realized that she had found the place mentioned in his note. But where was the gateway? With a sense of urgency, Arya stood up, scanning the surrounding area. The valley was narrow, flanked by towering cliffs, and the only sound that filled the air was the quiet gurgle of the river. The riddle had mentioned following the silence, so perhaps it was not the sound of the river she should be listening to, but the absence of sound. She stepped carefully along the river's edge, her boots crunching softly on the gravel. As she walked, the air seemed to grow colder, the silence deepening. And then, just as she was about to turn back, she felt it. A faint breeze brushing past her cheek, carrying with it a sense of something other, the faintest hint of an opening, as though the earth were shifting, hiding something from her view. Arya knelt again, her fingers brushing the moss-covered rocks. A strange sense of reverence filled her chest, and as her hands pressed against the cold stone, she felt the earth give way, just slightly. There was a hidden door here, a mechanism of sorts, concealed by nature itself. With a deep breath, Arya pushed, and the stone began to move, sliding back to reveal an entrance cloaked in shadows. The gateway. With her heart racing, Arya stepped forward, the stone door closing silently behind her as she entered the hidden passage. The air inside was thick and cool, filled with the scent of damp earth and ancient stone. The passage was narrow, the walls lined with strange symbols and carvings, some familiar, others unlike anything Arya had ever seen. She ran her fingers over the markings, feeling a strange pulse beneath her touch, as though the very stones of the cave were alive, whispering secrets long forgotten. As she continued deeper into the cave, the path began to widen, and soon, Arya found herself standing in a vast cavern. The space seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions, filled with shimmering crystals that cast a soft, ethereal light. It was beautiful, breathtaking in its scale and majesty, and yet, there was something unsettling about it. The stillness of the cavern felt oppressive, as though it were waiting, holding its breath, for something to happen. Arya stepped cautiously into the center of the cavern, her eyes scanning the shadows. She could feel the presence of something ancient, something powerful watching her, guiding her forward. The air was thick with a strange energy, and she knew with a sudden clarity that this was the heart of the Caves of Wonder. Here, in the depths of the earth, the answers she sought were hidden, but they would not come easily. The caves were not just a place of wonder, they were a test. The echoes of her footsteps bounced off the walls, and as she moved deeper into the cavern, the air seemed to hum with an unspoken promise. The deeper she ventured, the stronger the sensation grew, until it felt as though the very earth itself was alive, pulsing with power. At the center of the cavern, Arya found it. A massive stone pedestal, adorned with intricate carvings, glowing faintly in the dim light. Upon it, there lay a large ancient tome, its cover worn and cracked with age. She approached it slowly, her fingers trembling as she reached for the book. The moment her hand touched its surface, the entire cavern seemed to come alive, the walls shifting and groaning as though the cave itself were waking. And then, with a voice that resonated from the depths of the earth, a single word echoed through the cavern. "Choose." The cavern hummed with an energy that vibrated through Arya's bones, her hands still hovering over the ancient tome. The word choose echoed in the air like a command, as if the very stone beneath her feet was urging her to make a decision. The pulsating glow from the pedestal intensified, bathing the entire cavern in an eerie light, and for the first time since she had entered the Caves of Wonder, Arya felt fear stir within her. She stood frozen, her heart hammering in her chest, torn between the overwhelming pull of curiosity and the nagging voice of caution that warned her not to proceed. The book before her seemed to beckon her, its pages unreadable from a distance, its secrets tantalizingly out of reach. But something was off. There was an undeniable sense that this was no ordinary tome. This was a gatekeeper, a challenge set by the very caves to test those who dared to enter. Arya took a cautious step forward, her fingers grazing the edges of the pedestal. The moment she touched it, the ground beneath her shifted slightly, the air growing heavier, charged with an invisible weight. She could hear whispers, soft at first, like the rustling of leaves in a distant wind. But as she leaned closer to the book, the whispers became clearer, more urgent, as though they were speaking directly to her. You must choose. The voice was neither male nor female, but something in between, an ancient, timeless presence that felt both familiar and completely alien. It echoed in her mind as much as it did in the air, a constant murmur that she could not escape. Arya glanced at the tome, its cover decorated with symbols that shifted and danced before her eyes. The more she looked, the more they seemed to change, rearranging themselves into new patterns, as though the book itself was alive, its contents never fixed, always in motion. What is this? Arya thought, her mind racing. She had heard of artifacts like this, ancient relics that could alter reality, change time, and even shape destinies. But this was beyond anything she had expected. This was not just a book. This was a living entity, a force of the earth itself, bound to the very heart of the Caves of Wonder. The knowledge you seek comes with a price, the voice continued, now more insistent. And every choice has its consequence. Arya swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her chest. This was her chance. The chance to uncover the mysteries her grandfather had so often spoken of, to discover the true power hidden within the caves. But at what cost? Her fingers trembled as they hovered over the book's cover. She could almost feel the pull of the pages beneath it, the answers waiting just beyond her grasp. But the voice that came from the very earth itself, warned her that there was more at stake than simple knowledge. What if this was not a gift, but a trap? As if sensing her hesitation, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, swirling around her like a storm. The walls of the cavern seemed to vibrate with the sound of distant voices, echoing from the past. Arya closed her eyes for a moment, trying to center herself, but the voices persisted, growing in volume until she could no longer ignore them. Choose wisely, for the past and the future are intertwined. One voice whispered, soft and mournful, "What you awaken cannot be undone." Another voice warned, sharp and stern, "The price will be greater than you can imagine." A third voice, cold and distant, chimed in. Arya's heart skipped a beat. The voices were not just whispers. They were echoes of those who had come before her, the souls of the brave or foolish, adventurers who had dared to enter these caves in search of the same power. Their warnings, spoken in unison, painted a picture of something far darker than she had anticipated. She opened her eyes and took a step back, her hand instinctively retracting from the book. The cavern seemed to sigh, the air heavy with the weight of the decision. She knew that whatever path she chose, there would be no turning back. The choice she made in this moment would determine not just her fate, but perhaps the fate of the entire world. The voice returned, clearer now, its tone less cryptic and more direct. Two paths lie before you, Aria Rivers. One will lead you to untold knowledge and power, but at the cost of your soul. The other will offer you a life of peace, free from the temptation of greatness, but you will be left with a deep, lingering emptiness. Aria's breath caught in her throat. Two paths, two choices, the weight of her grandfather's legend, the riddle he had passed down to her, the quest she had embarked on. All of it had led her here, to this singular, defining moment. Her eyes flickered back to the tome. She felt the invisible force pulling her toward it once again. But this time she was more aware of the weight of the decision. Was she truly ready to unlock the knowledge of the ages, knowing the cost? Or would she turn away, choosing the path of peace, even if it meant forsaking the very adventure she had longed for? Aria's gaze shifted toward the walls of the cavern, her eyes scanning the carvings that adorned the stone. Some of the symbols seemed familiar, others were completely foreign. But there, near the base of the pedestal, she saw something that made her stop. A small symbol carved deep into the stone. It was a simple shape, but it radiated a faint, golden light. It was a pattern she had seen before, the same pattern that had appeared in the ancient texts her grandfather had kept hidden. The symbol of a circle with a single line cutting through it. It was the symbol of balance, the symbol of choice. The realization struck her like a bolt of lightning. The caves were not just about knowledge, they were about balance. The path she chose would not just shape her future. It would shape the very forces that govern the world. The power that lay in these caves was not meant to be wielded by one person. It was meant to be shared, understood, and respected. And yet it was too tempting, too alluring to resist. Choose, the voice urged again. But this time, there was something different in its tone. A note of finality, as if it knew that Aria had reached the precipice of decision. Aria closed her eyes, breathing deeply, letting the silence of the cavern wash over her. She had spent her life seeking knowledge, following the path laid out for her by her grandfather. But in this moment, she realized that true understanding was not just about finding answers. It was about knowing the right questions to ask. The decision was not just about what she would gain. It was about what she would lose, and she could not afford to make this choice blindly. "I will choose the path of balance," she said, her voice steady, though her heart raced in her chest. The moment the words left her lips, the cavern seemed to respond. The ground rumbled softly beneath her feet, the stone pillars vibrating with energy. The book before her glowed brightly, the symbols on its cover shifting once more, rearranging themselves into something entirely new. The voice, now softer, almost approving, whispered once more, "You have chosen wisely, Aria Rivers. But remember, balance is fragile. Protect it or all will be lost." The pedestal began to sink into the ground, the tome slowly receding into the earth. as though the cave itself were swallowing it whole. But as the book disappeared from view, a soft light remained, illuminating the center of the cavern. In the distance, Arya could make out something new. A doorway hidden in the farthest corner of the cavern, now visible for the first time. It was the path forward, the true journey. As she stepped toward it, the voice echoed once more. The caves of wonder are just the beginning, Arya. What you seek lies beyond. And with that, Arya stepped through the doorway, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The passage beyond the doorway was narrow, the walls slick with moisture, as if the very rock itself were alive. Arya's breath echoed off the stone, but even her exhaled breaths seemed to be swallowed by the oppressive silence that hung in the air. The light that had guided her through the cavern had dimmed, leaving her in near total darkness. Only the faintest glow seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves, a pale, spectral light that pulsed as if the cave was breathing, alive with ancient magic. Her heart thudded in her chest as she took cautious steps forward, the darkness thick and heavy, pressing in on her from all sides. She had chosen the path of balance, the path of wisdom and restraint. But what did that truly mean? What would be asked of her next? The voice that had guided her thus far, the one that had promised both knowledge and danger, seemed to have faded into the background, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the growing sense that something was watching her. The cave had been waiting for her to choose, and now it seemed to be testing her. The tunnel curved ahead, leading deeper into the earth, and as she walked, the air grew colder. A soft breeze brushed against her skin, like a whisper just out of reach, but the source of the wind was nowhere to be seen. It was as though the very passage was alive, shifting around her. Then, as she rounded the corner, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. The ceiling stretched high above, so far that Arya could not see the top. But it was not the size of the room that stole her breath. It was the figures standing in the shadows. At first, she thought they were statues, figures carved from the stone, their forms so still and lifelike that they could have been cast in marble. But as her eyes adjusted to the dim light, Arya realized they were not statues at all. These figures were alive, though they moved not an inch. They were shadows, tall and silent. They loomed in the distance, their forms shifting like smoke, bending and twisting in unnatural ways. Their eyes, if they could be called eyes, glowed faintly, like the remnants of a forgotten fire, burning with an ancient hunger. They stood in a circle, their long arms stretched outward as if they were waiting for something or someone. Arya froze, her mind racing. She had heard stories of such beings, the shadows of the depths they were called, ancient protectors of the caves, bound to its walls, creatures who existed not as flesh, but as embodiments of darkness itself. They were said to test those who dared enter the caves of wonder, testing their courage, their resolve, and most of all, their worth. The shadows were not hostile, not at first glance, but there was a quiet malevolence about them, a quiet promise of danger that lingered in the air. Arya's instincts screamed at her to turn back, but she knew she could not. The path ahead was the only way forward. As she stepped into the chamber, the shadows did not move, but their eyes, those glowing embers, followed her every move. Suddenly, the voice returned, the one that had spoken to her when she first touched the book. But this time it was not warm or comforting. It was cold, distant, and filled with a warning. The trial begins now. To pass, you must face your deepest fear, the one that lies hidden within you. Arya's breath caught in her throat. Fear. She had not expected this. The Caves of Wonder were supposed to be a place of discovery, of knowledge, but this was a test of something far more personal. The shadows began to move, their bodies shifting in impossible ways, their forms stretching and collapsing into shapes that no human could comprehend. They danced through the air like liquid smoke, bending the very space around them. Arya's eyes widened as she felt herself being drawn deeper into the circle, her every step pushing her further toward the center of the chamber, toward the heart of the trial. One of the shadows detached itself from the others, its glowing eyes narrowing as it advanced toward her. It moved with unsettling grace, its form flickering like a flame caught in the wind. As it drew closer, Arya felt the temperature drop, the air growing thick with an oppressive weight, as though the very shadows were closing in on her soul. Face your fear, the voice intoned once more. Only by confronting it can you move forward. Arya's heart pounded in her chest, her mind scrambling for an explanation. But deep down, she knew what this was. It was not just a trial of strength or courage. It was a trial of the mind, of the spirit. To pass, she had to confront the very thing that haunted her. The shadow in front of her began to shift again, its form becoming more solid, more defined. It stretched its long, smoky arms toward her, its fingers like claws that seemed to pull at her very essence. And then it spoke. You fear the truth. You fear what you do not understand. The words were not spoken in a voice, but in a thought, an idea implanted directly in her mind. Arya's stomach turned. The shadow knew her. It had found the very core of her fear, the thing that had driven her all these years, the fear that she was not enough, that no matter how much she searched for knowledge, for understanding, it would never be enough. Arya had always been driven by a need to know. But what if, in her pursuit of knowledge, she had overlooked something more important? What if the very knowledge she sought had already been inside her, buried beneath layers of doubt and fear? What if she had been running away from the truth all along? The shadow's form rippled, changing once again. This time, it shifted into something more familiar, something she had seen before. The figure of her grandfather, standing before her, his face kind but sorrowful. His eyes, the same deep brown as hers, looked at her with a mixture of love and regret. "You are not ready," he said, his voice echoing in the chamber. "You have sought answers all your life, but you have never asked the right questions." Arya stumbled backward, her breath coming in short gasps. The figure of her grandfather remained, his gaze fixed on her. His image flickered like a candle in the wind, unstable, uncertain. The truth, her truth, was staring her in the face. "Choose," the shadow repeated. "Will you face the truth, or will you run from it?" Arya's mind reeled. She had always believed that the answer to her questions lay in the caves, in the ancient knowledge hidden within them. But now, standing before the apparition of her grandfather, she realized something that had eluded her all these years. The answers she sought weren't in the caves. They were in her. "I face it," Arya whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the shadows. The shadow of her grandfather smiled softly, his image dissipating into the air like mist in the morning sun. The other shadows, too, began to fade, their forms dissolving into nothingness. The oppressive weight lifted from the chamber, and the silence returned. The voice spoke one final time, its tone soft and approving. "You have passed the trial, Arya Rivers. But remember, the path forward will not be easy. The truth is powerful, but it is also dangerous. Use it wisely." The cavern began to shift once more, the walls of the chamber opening up to reveal a new passage, a path that led deeper into the caves. With a deep breath, Arya stepped forward. The trial was over, but the journey was just beginning. The passage ahead stretched into the depths, the air cool and thick with the scent of earth and stone. Arya's mind buzzed with the aftermath of the trial. She had confronted her fear, faced the truths she had hidden from for so long, and emerged stronger for it. But as she took her first steps into the new passageway, the weight of her journey settled over her once again. The voice that had guided her, the shadows that had tested her, these were not the final challenges. She could feel it in her bones. The true heart of the caves of wonder lay just beyond. As she moved forward, the walls around her began to shift, the stones seeming to pulse with energy, the light flickering like a heartbeat. This was no ordinary cave. The further she traveled, the more it seemed as if the very space around her was alive, aware of her presence. The path twisted and turned, but Arya pressed on, her determination unwavering. The deeper she went, the more the atmosphere changed. The air grew warmer, tinged with an unnatural heat that radiated from the walls. The glowing symbols on the stone flickered with a new intensity, casting eerie shadows that danced across the passage. It was as if the caves were alive, responding to her choices, to her very being. Suddenly, the passage opened into a vast chamber. The floor was smooth, but cracked, as though something powerful had once laid its hand upon it. At the far end of the chamber stood a large stone door, its surface covered in intricate carvings. The door was massive, so tall that it seemed to touch the very ceiling of the cavern. But it was not the door that held her attention. It was the strange energy emanating from it, an aura of ancient power that seemed to pulse with life. Arya felt the pull again, a magnetic force urging her forward, but this time it was different. It was not just a call to knowledge, it was a call to destiny. The voice had mentioned a heart within the caves, and she knew without a doubt that she had reached it. As she approached the door, she noticed the carvings on its surface. They were familiar in a way that made her pulse quicken. Symbols she had seen before, etched in the ancient texts her grandfather had kept hidden, carved into the walls of the cavern. But these symbols were different. They were more complex, their meanings layered and intertwined in ways that she could not yet comprehend. "The heart of the caves awaits," the voice whispered softly, its tone reverberating through her bones. "To open the door, you must understand the nature of the heart itself." Arya's breath caught in her throat. The heart? The caves of wonder were said to contain unimaginable power, powers that had shaped the world in forgotten ages. But the heart of the caves, that was something else entirely. That was the essence of the caves themselves. It was the source, the wellspring of all the secrets that lay within. As she reached out toward the door, the carvings began to glow, the symbols pulsing in time with her heartbeat. The temperature in the cavern rose sharply, and a hum filled the air, vibrating through her chest. The door was responding to her presence, but it was not yet ready to open. She stood before it, hesitant for a moment, as the weight of the moment pressed upon her. The voice had warned her of the dangers of seeking knowledge, of the consequences of awakening the heart. But she had come too far. She could not turn back now. Her path was set, and she knew she had to uncover the final truth. With a deep breath, she placed her hand against the door. The moment her hand made contact with the stone, the world around her seemed to shudder. The air itself seemed to ripple, and the light from the symbols intensified, bathing the cavern in an otherworldly glow. The hum of energy surged, and the door began to tremble as if awakening from a long slumber. Then, suddenly, the stone cracked, and a low, rumbling voice echoed from deep within the chamber. To unlock the heart, you must face the essence of your own soul, the voice intoned, deep and resonant. You must understand what you seek, for what you seek will change you forever. The chamber around her began to warp, the walls bending and shifting like liquid stone. The carvings on the door twisted and spun, forming new patterns, new symbols. Arya stepped back, her heart pounding in her chest. She had read of such trials, of tests that reached deep into the very core of one's being, but she had never expected it to feel this real, this intense. Then, from the cracks in the door, something began to emerge. First, a flicker, a flash of light, bright and dazzling. Then the light took form, shifting into an image, a vision, a memory. It was her, but not the Arya standing in the cave. This was a younger version of herself, standing in her grandfather's study, the room filled with old books and maps. The younger Arya was holding a journal in her hands, flipping through the pages with a mixture of excitement and fear. The pages of the journal were filled with strange symbols, the same symbols that had appeared throughout the caves. The journey is not about the destination, the voice said, now softer, more intimate. It is about understanding who you are and what you are willing to sacrifice to uncover the truth. The younger Arya looked up, her eyes filled with uncertainty. She turned to her grandfather, sitting across the room, his face serious and full of concern. Grandfather, the young Arya said, her voice trembling. What if I can't find it? What if the caves are just myths? What if the power doesn't exist? Her grandfather smiled softly, though his eyes betrayed the sadness he tried to hide. The power exists, Arya, but it is not what you think. It is not meant to be wielded by any one person. It is meant to be understood, to be respected. The truth is always more complicated than we can imagine. The vision shifted, and Arya found herself standing before the same door she now faced in the cavern. The younger Arya reached out to touch it, but as she did, the door glowed brightly, blinding her, and she was forced to step back. The door will not open until you understand, the voice intoned once more. You must face your own heart, your true self. What are you willing to sacrifice for the knowledge you seek? Arya's pulse raced as the vision faded, and the chamber around her returned to its former state. The door before her had not opened, but the path forward was clear. The heart of the caves was not just about unlocking a physical door. It was about unlocking the truth within herself. She had always sought knowledge, always been driven by the desire to uncover the hidden mysteries of the world. But what was she willing to sacrifice? Was she prepared to face the consequences of her actions? The power she sought came with a price, and she had to decide whether she was willing to pay it. She stood before the door, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. The light from the carvings illuminated the chamber, casting long shadows across the stone. The voice, ever present, seemed to fade into the background, leaving Arya alone with her thoughts. With a deep breath, she placed her hand against the door once more. This time it felt different. It wasn't just about unlocking the secrets of the caves. It was about unlocking the deepest parts of herself. "I am ready," she whispered, the words almost too soft to hear. The door trembled once more, the carvings lighting up with a brilliant glow. And then, with a sound like the crack of thunder, the door began to open. The door groaned as it slowly inched open, its massive stone frame scraping against the cavern floor, sending tremors through the air. The glow from the carvings intensified, bathing the entire chamber in an ethereal light that was neither warm nor cold, but carried the weight of ancient power. It felt as though the very essence of the cave itself was awakening, stretching and unfolding after eons of silence. Arya stood before it, her breath shallow, her heart pounding in her chest. She had made her choice, and the door had responded. Now she had to walk through it, but what lay beyond was unknown, and the weight of what she had just done, the choice to unlock the heart of the caves, was pressing heavily on her shoulders. Could she truly understand the power she was about to encounter? As the door finally swung wide, the chamber beyond revealed itself. It was unlike anything Arya had ever imagined. The walls were no longer stone but appeared to be a living, breathing entity, pulsing with vibrant colors that shifted like the tides. The floor beneath her feet seemed to ripple, as though it were made of liquid light, flowing and ebbing like the ocean. In the center of the chamber stood an enormous, crystalline structure, glowing with a soft, inner light that made it appear as if it were alive. The air was thick with energy, an energy that was both calming and overwhelming at the same time. Arya could feel it tugging at her very being, pulling her closer to the crystalline heart. This was the core of the Caves of Wonder, the essence of its power. It had been waiting for her, waiting for the one who was worthy enough to unlock its secrets. She took a cautious step forward, her gaze fixed on the heart. But as she did, the ground beneath her feet trembled again, and a voice, this time not the voice of the caves, but something deeper, older, boomed through the chamber. "You have come far, Arya Rivers, but you must understand, the heart is not a gift to be taken lightly. It is a force that transcends time and space, a force that binds the fabric of existence itself." The voice was unlike any Arya had heard before. It resonated deep within her, a vibration she felt in the marrow of her bones. It was not a warning, but a statement, one that spoke of the grave responsibility she was about to assume. "What you seek is not power, but understanding. But be warned, those who seek knowledge without comprehension, those who approach the heart with greed, will find themselves lost in the currents of time, drifting forever in the void." Arya felt a chill run down her spine. The heart was not a mere object, nor was it just a source of power. It was something far more profound. It was a conduit, a bridge between the past, present, and future, a force that could alter the very fabric of reality. She took another step forward, her eyes locked on the heart. It seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat, as though it recognized her presence, her intent. The closer she got, the more the energy around her intensified, swirling like a storm just beneath the surface of the light. She could feel her body responding to it, her mind opening to the possibility of what lay ahead. But then, as if to remind her of the weight of her choice, the voice spoke again. "You must decide, Arya. Will you claim the heart, or will you walk away, leaving it to slumber for another age?" Her heart skipped a beat. The choice was hers. She could take the heart, unlock the boundless knowledge and power it offered, but at what cost? The warning echoed in her mind. The heart was not to be taken lightly. To claim it was to change the very course of her destiny. The world itself could shift, could bend to her will. But there was another path. She could walk away, leave the heart untouched, allow the power to rest. In doing so, she would return to the world unchanged, her life continuing as it always had. But could she live with the regret of never knowing the full extent of what lay hidden here, in the heart of the caves? Arya closed her eyes for a moment, her mind racing. She thought of her grandfather's words, his warnings about the dangers of seeking too much, too fast. She had come this far, yes, but perhaps there was wisdom in knowing when to stop, in respecting the mysteries that existed beyond understanding. And yet, the pull of the heart was undeniable. It called to her, urging her forward, offering her the answers to all the questions that had plagued her for years. The knowledge she had sought her entire life lay within her grasp. Was she truly ready to let it slip away? As the moments stretched on, the energy around her began to shift. The light from the heart began to dim, as though the heart itself was growing impatient. Arya could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown, the seconds ticking by with an increasing sense of urgency. The voice returned once more, softer this time, almost like a whisper. "The heart will not wait forever, Arya. Time bends to those who dare to seize it, but it also slips away from those who hesitate." She took a deep breath, her mind clearing as the swirling energy settled into a stillness. She knew what she had to do. With steady hands, Arya reached out toward the crystal heart. As her fingers brushed against the surface, a wave of energy surged through her, flooding her senses with a dizzying array of images, sensations, and emotions. She saw the past, visions of civilizations long forgotten, their rise and fall etched into the very fabric of time. She saw the present, glimpses of the world as it was now, chaotic, beautiful, and fragile. And she saw the future, 1,000 possible futures, each one branching out like a vast web, full of infinite possibilities. But among these visions, one stood out, a single clear path, a future where Arya herself stood at the center, guiding the world with the knowledge she had unlocked. It was a future of balance, of wisdom, a future where she had learned to wield the power of the heart not with greed, but with humility and understanding. As the visions faded and the energy settled, Arya withdrew her hand from the heart. The chamber was silent now, the light dimming to a soft glow. She stood there, breathing heavily, her heart still racing. The voice spoke once more, its tone filled with a sense of completion. "You have chosen wisely, Arya Rivers. The heart is now a part of you. Its power flows through you, but it is not yours to control. It is a force that must be respected, a force that will guide you as you walk the path ahead. Use it wisely, for the choices you make will shape the future of all who dwell in this world. Arya stood still for a long moment, the weight of the decision settling upon her like a cloak. The heart had revealed its secrets, but its true meaning was still unfolding within her. She had not taken its power for herself. Instead, she had chosen to let it guide her, to let it shape the course of her destiny. And as she turned to leave the chamber, the light dimming behind her, she knew that her journey was far from over. The Caves of Wonder had shown her a glimpse of the future, but what lay ahead was still unknown. The heart of the caves was a part of her now, but its true potential had yet to be revealed. Arya stepped away from the crystalline heart, feeling its presence reverberate within her, a steady pulse in her chest. She had touched its core, and in doing so, something within her had changed. The ancient power that had thrummed in the chamber now flowed through her veins, alive and vivid. But as she walked back toward the entrance of the heart chamber, the weight of her choice settled on her shoulders with a finality that was both exhilarating and overwhelming. The air around her hummed softly, as if the caves themselves had recognized her decision. The once ever-shifting walls of the cavern had now stilled, no longer restless or alive with energy, but quietly attentive. Arya's every step felt like a dance with time, a movement towards something both profound and dangerous. The path back seemed longer somehow, as though the caves had changed in response to the choices she had made. The light from the carvings dimmed as she passed them, their once vibrant glow now softer, almost like a distant memory. She had unlocked the heart, but the consequences of her actions were not yet fully clear. As Arya reached the edge of the cavern, she noticed something that hadn't been there before. A dark shadow stretching across the floor, deeper and darker than the natural darkness of the caves. The shadow seemed to move, as though alive, swirling in patterns that defied the stillness of the cavern. The voice, once a constant presence, returned now with urgency. The heart's awakening has not gone unnoticed, Arya Rivers. Your decision has set in motion a series of events that will echo far beyond these walls. Arya stopped in her tracks, her heart skipping a beat. She had known there would be consequences, but the voice had never spoken like this before. The urgency, the underlying tension, it was as though the very fabric of reality was about to tear. The shadow on the floor shifted again, coiling and writhing like smoke given form. Slowly, it began to rise, taking shape, becoming more solid, more distinct. From within the darkness, two glowing eyes emerged bright, burning like molten gold. They were watching her, unblinking, and with an intensity that sent a chill through her spine. Out of the shadow stepped a figure, tall, cloaked in flowing black robes that seemed to absorb the light around them. The figure was a silhouette, its features hidden beneath the hood, but there was no mistaking the presence it commanded. The air around them grew colder, heavier, as if the very atmosphere was recoiling from the figure's arrival. "Who are you?" Arya demanded, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. She had unlocked the heart, but she had not expected to encounter this. Whatever this figure was, it was tied to the heart's awakening, and it was clear that whatever had followed her, it was not something she could easily dismiss. The figure did not answer immediately. Instead, it raised a hand, and as it did, the very air seemed to twist. A low, reverberating hum filled the chamber, growing louder and louder until Arya felt it vibrating through her bones. The walls around her seemed to shudder in response, the stone cracking as if under pressure, yet no physical damage was done. It was as though the entire space had become unstable, and the figure was at the center of it. Finally, it spoke, its voice low and ancient, as though it carried the weight of centuries. "I am the Echo," it said. "I am the one who guards the balance between knowledge and chaos. You have awakened the heart, and in doing so, you have disturbed that balance. The heart is a conduit, yes, but it is also a gate that connects the realms of possibility and destruction. You have opened it, and now you must face the consequences." Arya's mind raced. She had sensed the danger of the heart, but this was something beyond her understanding. She had come for knowledge, for wisdom, but the cost had been far greater than she had imagined. The Echo's words hung in the air like an omen, and she felt the weight of their meaning sink into her chest. She had opened the gate, and now something had to come through. "What do you want from me?" Arya asked, her voice sharp but trembling slightly. She had already faced one trial in these caves, but this was different. This was something she had not prepared for. The figure did not move, but the air around Arya seemed to tighten, the pressure increasing with each passing second. The Echo's eyes burned with an intensity that felt like they were peeling away the layers of her soul. "What I want from you," the Echo said, its voice calm but chilling, "is for you to understand the true cost of your actions. You have claimed the heart, but the heart is not something that belongs to any one being. It is a force beyond your comprehension, and it is not meant to be wielded by a single person. What you have set in motion is a chain of events that cannot be undone." Arya's pulse quickened as the weight of the words sunk in. "What do you mean? What events? What are you saying?" The figure finally stepped forward, its presence like a shadow cast upon the very world around her. With each step it took, the cavern seemed to darken, as though it were moving through a different realm, a space where time itself bent and stretched. "The heart holds the power to rewrite reality," the Echo continued, its voice a low, echoing tremor. "But this power is not without its cost. It is a force that has been kept dormant for a reason. It can create or destroy, but it can also shatter. The knowledge you now hold will bring both enlightenment and destruction, depending on how you wield it. The path you walk is one of great consequence." The figure's eyes flared once more, a brief flash of blinding light. "And you are not the only one who seeks the heart." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Arya's mind reeled. There were others who sought the heart, who knew of its power. She was not the only one who had come to claim it. "You must decide," Arya Rivers, the Echo intoned, its voice low and solemn. "You must decide whether to continue on this path, to wield the power of the heart, or to let go and return to the world you once knew. But be warned, your decision will affect all who live in this world. The choices you make will ripple through time itself. What you awaken can never be put to rest." The cavern grew silent, the air thick with the weight of the decision before her. Arya stood frozen, her mind swirling with questions. The heart, the knowledge, it was not just a gift. It was a burden, a responsibility that would shape her future and the future of the world. And now, with the Echo's words hanging in the balance, Arya realized that the path ahead would not be easy. The power she had unlocked would not be so easily controlled. There were others who would seek it, who would stop at nothing to use it for their own ends. "The choice is yours," the echo said, fading back into the shadows. "But remember, time is not on your side." The air remained heavy with the echo's final words, their ominous weight pressing down on Arya. The figure had disappeared into the shadows as silently as it had come, leaving her alone in the cavern, her mind swirling with uncertainty. The heart of the cave still pulsed behind her, its energy now familiar, but no less daunting. It hummed softly, its power undisturbed, as though waiting for her next move. But what was that move? Arya stood in the dim light, feeling the path ahead stretch out before her like an unsolvable maze. The echo had warned her about the cost of wielding the heart, about the potential chaos it could unleash. And yet, the allure of the knowledge, of the wisdom that lay within its depths, was almost unbearable. Her eyes were drawn back to the crystalline heart, still glowing softly at the center of the chamber. It was a beacon, a symbol of power and possibility. But it was also a reminder that she had made a choice. The heart was no longer just a myth or a legend. It was part of her now. The path she had chosen was set in motion, and there was no turning back. But she wasn't sure if she was ready for what came next. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps, distant yet unmistakable. She turned, her heart leaping in her chest. The cave seemed to breathe with the presence of someone or something else, someone who had crossed the boundary she had not seen before. Arya's hand instinctively reached for the pendant that hung around her neck, the one that had been given to her by her grandfather. The pendant, a small, silver amulet, had always been a symbol of guidance, a connection to the past that grounded her. As her fingers brushed against it, a sense of calm washed over her. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to center her thoughts as the footsteps grew louder, closer. Then, as if the shadows themselves parted, a figure emerged from the dark, tall, cloaked, and bearing an air of quiet authority. This time, Arya did not hesitate. The figure's eyes met hers with a knowing gaze, as though they had been waiting for this very moment. There was no malice in their eyes, no threat, only an understanding, as if they recognized the heavy burden she now carried. The figure spoke, their voice calm but resonant, filling the chamber like a distant echo. "So you have unlocked it," they said. "I sensed the awakening from miles away. The heart has chosen you, just as it has chosen countless others before. But unlike those who came before you, I see something in you, something that might just be able to handle the weight of its power." Arya's eyes narrowed, her pulse quickening once more. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the anxiety that churned inside her. "What do you know about the heart?" The figure stepped forward, shedding their cloak. A cascade of silver hair tumbled from beneath the hood, framing a face that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. Their eyes, dark, like the vast unknown, met hers with quiet intensity. "I am Lyriel," the figure said, "one of the last of the keepers. My role has always been to watch, to ensure that the heart remains balanced, never falling into the hands of those who would misuse its power. But you, Arya Rivers, you have shown a connection to it that I cannot ignore." The name hit Arya like a thunderclap, but she kept her composure. The keepers. She had heard of them, ancient beings tasked with protecting the knowledge of the caves, and in particular, the heart. They were believed to have disappeared centuries ago, their existence little more than a legend. A keeper? Arya murmured, still trying to process the revelation. I thought the keepers were all gone. Are you the last one? Lyriel's gaze softened, and they nodded. I am one of the last, yes. There are few of us left now, but the heart remains, and it must be guarded. Not because it is something to be feared, but because it is something that must be understood. And right now, Arya, you are the one who holds the key to understanding it. Arya's mind raced. This was a crucial moment, one she hadn't anticipated. She had unlocked the heart, but now, it seemed, there were layers to its power she hadn't yet uncovered. Lyriel's presence confirmed that there were forces at play beyond her understanding, forces that had been shaping her journey without her even knowing it. What do you mean, I hold the key? She asked, trying to make sense of the cryptic words. The echo said that the heart can destroy or create. What does that mean? What am I supposed to do with it? Lyriel stepped closer, their voice lowering, filled with a grave urgency. The heart is a conduit, a bridge between the physical and metaphysical realms. It allows for the reshaping of time itself, the rewriting of fate. It can give you answers to the greatest mysteries of the universe, but it can also unravel the threads of reality should it fall into the wrong hands. The echo was right. It is not something to be wielded lightly, but it is also not something to be feared. Arya felt her chest tighten, a wave of uncertainty crashing over her. She had been so sure of her choice, so certain that unlocking the heart was the key to the knowledge she sought. But now, standing in the presence of a keeper, she realized how little she truly understood. Then what am I supposed to do? Arya asked, her voice tinged with frustration. If the heart can change everything, if it can alter fate itself, how do I know what's right? How do I know that I won't destroy everything by trying to fix it? Lyriel's eyes softened, and they placed a hand on her shoulder, a grounding touch that felt like it connected them to something much older, much deeper. The heart is not a tool to be controlled, Arya, they said. It is a force, an ancient essence. You must learn to listen to it to understand its rhythm. The heart does not give power freely. It demands wisdom in return. You must trust in yourself, in your connection to it. Only then will you know what path to walk. Arya swallowed hard, the weight of their words settling into her like a stone. The heart was not a weapon. It was a force of nature. Like the tides or the stars, it could not be controlled, only respected. Lyriel took a step back, their eyes scanning the cavern, the faint glow of the heart casting long shadows across the walls. There is more to this place than you know, Arya. The Caves of Wonder are not simply a repository of ancient knowledge. They are a nexus, a meeting point for all the worlds that exist in the threads of fate. And you, now that you have awakened the heart, are at the center of it. You will find that those who seek the heart are not the only ones who will come for you. Arya felt a chill run down her spine. Who else is coming? Lyriel's gaze grew distant, and for a moment, it was as though they were looking beyond the present, into some far-off future. You will soon find out, they said quietly. But for now, remember this, your choices will shape the fate of many. The heart will guide you, but only if you learn to listen. And when the time comes, you must decide. Will you preserve the balance, or will you reshape the world in your image? The cavern around Arya seemed to hum with a strange, almost sentient energy, as though the very stones were alive and listening. The shadows that had once felt ominous now appeared to pulse with life, stretching and retracting like breathing lungs. Lyriel's presence felt like a constant weight pressing against her chest, solid, unyielding, and yet comforting in its quiet authority. She took a step back, feeling the warmth of the heart's energy behind her, like a beacon drawing her in while also warning her away. The weight of her choices had never been so clear. The heart was a conduit for immense power, but it was also a great responsibility, one that Arya was not sure she was ready to bear. Lyriel turned toward her, their face unreadable, eyes glimmering like distant stars. "You must understand, Arya. The heart is not just a wellspring of power. It is a mirror. It reflects the desires and fears of those who seek it. And you, above all others, have the potential to shape it in ways that even the keepers never foresaw." The weight of their words felt like a burden slowly being placed upon her shoulders, each syllable adding to the load. Arya's fingers clenched around the pendant hanging from her neck, the only thing that seemed to ground her in this surreal moment. "But why me?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "Why did the heart choose me? I don't have the answers. I'm just someone trying to make sense of a world that never made sense to me." Lyriel's gaze softened, and for the first time since their arrival, the keeper's expression seemed almost human, vulnerable even. "It is not the heart that chooses you, Arya," they said. "It is your soul that calls to it. The heart recognizes those who are not content with the world as it is, those who seek to understand, to question, to reshape. You are not alone in this. There are others like you, others who will come to seek the heart's power." Arya felt a sudden pang of fear. "What do you mean, others like me? I thought I was the only one who had awakened it. The echo warned me that there would be consequences, that I wasn't the only one who knew about the heart." Lyriel's eyes grew distant once again, their expression hardening. "You were never meant to be the only one. The heart calls to those who are ready for its power, but not everyone will use it wisely. Some will seek it to control others, to bend the world to their will. And others—" Lyriel's voice faltered for a moment, as though a deeper truth was about to be revealed. "And others will try to destroy it, to prevent anyone from wielding its power. There are factions in the world, hidden ancient forces that have existed for millennia, all with their own desires for the heart. Some want to use its power to create, others to tear down everything that stands in their way. You will face them, Arya. They will come for you, and they will try to stop you, or perhaps they will try to control you." Arya swallowed, the words like cold steel sinking deep into her chest. The weight of her role, the enormity of the decision she had made, had never been so clear. She had unlocked the heart, but in doing so, she had opened a door that might never close. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked, her voice barely more than a breath. "How can I stop what's coming?" Lyriel stepped closer, their presence enveloping her like a protective shield. "You must trust in yourself, Arya. The heart will not give you answers unless you are ready to seek them. You must make your own choice. And when the time comes, you will know what to do." Arya's heart pounded in her chest, but there was something within her, a flicker of hope, of determination, that rose to meet the challenge. The heart had chosen her, but it was more than just a call to power. It was a call to change the world. The cavern around them began to shift again, the walls trembling as the ground beneath them seemed to quake with energy. The heart's pulse grew louder, more insistent, as though it were calling her, urging her to act. "It is time, Arya," Lyriel said, their voice firm. "Time for you to decide. Will you reshape the world in the image of your dreams? Or will you let the heart remain dormant, locked away for eternity?" Arya took a deep breath. The decision before her was not an easy one. She had always believed in the power of knowledge, in the ability to understand and make sense of the world. But the power the heart offered was different. It was not just knowledge, but the ability to alter reality itself. She turned toward the heart, her hand reaching out, as if the energy it emitted was calling her name. The glow of the crystals bathed her in light, and for a brief moment, the world outside the cavern seemed to disappear. There was only the heart, pulsing in time with her own breath. The whispers of the caves grew louder now, urging her to make her choice. She could feel the weight of the future pressing down on her, each moment stretching out before her, filled with infinite possibilities. But there was something else, too, a deep knowing within her, a quiet voice that told her what needed to be done. "I choose to move forward," Arya whispered, her words a vow to herself. "I will not let fear dictate my path. I will learn to listen to the heart, to understand its power and use it wisely. I will protect the balance." As the words left her lips, the ground trembled beneath her feet, and the heart pulsed once more, brighter than ever before. The cavern around her seemed to respond, the walls shifting and closing in, the echoes of past choices reverberating through the very stone. Lyriel nodded, their expression approving yet somber. "You have made your choice, Arya Rivers. But know this, the heart will not be kind to those who wield it without purpose. It will test you, challenge you, and force you to confront your darkest fears. Only those with the courage to face themselves will find the path forward." Arya felt a sense of calm wash over her. The uncertainty, the fear, it was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She had made the decision to face the heart, to learn from it, to embrace its power and its challenges. As she stepped closer to the heart, the light from its crystals enveloped her, and the world outside the cavern seemed to fall away. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger, and yet, for the first time, Arya felt ready. "I will learn," she said quietly. "I will face whatever comes." And as she touched the heart once more, a surge of energy coursed through her, the very essence of the caves and its secrets flooding into her mind. She was no longer just a seeker of knowledge. She was now its keeper. The end. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you have any thoughts, feedback, or ideas for future stories, please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the soothing background music for a while. Wishing you a peaceful night. Take care, and sweet dreams.